One of the richest, most beloved women in all of music was once a little girl who didn't even own a pair of shoes. She was born in a one-room cabin in the mountains of Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children. There was no money to pay the doctor, so her father paid the midwife with a sack of oatmeal. Her name was Dolly Parton, and that sack of oatmeal would become the greatest investment in history. She was born on January 19, 1946, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains. Her family was desperately poor. Her father was a tobacco farmer who could not read or write, but Dolly always called him the smartest man she ever knew. The cabin had no running water and no electricity. The winters were so cold that her parents would place newborn babies among the blankets to keep them warm. But poverty was not the only truth in that home. There was another: music. Her mother sang the old mountain ballads, the English folk songs, the church hymns. Dolly was singing before she could even fully speak. Music was the one kind of wealth that rose above the walls of that cabin. She made her first guitar herself. From an old mandolin and 2 strings, she wrote her first song at 7 years old. And in that moment, a dream took shape in that little girl's mind: to get out of these mountains. How does a child who has nothing dream of conquering the world? The answer, perhaps, was precisely because she had nothing at all. The most famous story of Dolly's childhood is about a coat. One winter, her mother wanted to sew her a coat, but they had no money for fabric, so she stitched together the colorful scraps of cloth the neighbors had given them. As she sewed, her mother told her the Bible story of Joseph and the coat of many colors his father made for him. Dolly wore that coat with pride, walking to school feeling like a princess. But the children at school laughed. They called her poor. They mocked the patched-up rainbow coat. That day, Dolly's heart was broken, but years later she turned that pain into one of the most beautiful songs of her life, Coat of Many Colors. The lesson in that song was simple: poverty is nothing to be ashamed of, because something woven with love is worth far more than money. This would become the philosophy of Dolly's entire life. That moment when people mock you, it can break you or it can light your fire. Which one do you think Dolly chose? In high school, she made a bold promise in front of her entire class. One day she would be famous. Everyone laughed, but Dolly was serious. The day after she graduated, with a cardboard suitcase and a head full of dreams, she boarded a bus for Nashville. She had chosen to light the fire. When she arrived in Nashville, Dolly was 18 years old and had almost no money. But she had 2 things: an incredible talent and a will that would never give up. In those first days outside a laundromat, filling a bun with a sausage for a meal, she met the love of her life, Carl Dean. The bond that began that day would last a full 58 years. At first, she wrote songs for others. Her pen was so sharp that she drew attention quickly. And in 1967, Porter Wagoner, and one of the biggest stars in country music, invited her onto his television show. It was Dolly's first big break, but it was also a cage. She was in Porter's shadow. The show carried his name. He made the decisions. Dolly was becoming a star, but not her own star. For years, they sang duets and won awards together. But the mountain girl inside Dolly knew she could not stay on someone else's show forever. She had to carve her own path, and the price of that would be heavy. Leaving the person who lifted you to success can be the hardest and the most necessary decision of all. How exactly did Dolly make that choice? In 1973 came the most extraordinary day of Dolly's life. In a single day, she wrote 2 of the greatest songs in all of music history. The first was Jolene. As the legend goes, the inspiration came from a beautiful red-haired bank teller who was paying a little too much attention to her husband. She turned her jealousy into a pleading kind of beauty. Jolene, please don't take my man. And on the very same day, she wrote something far more personal. She had decided to leave Porter Wagoner, to leave that cage. She wrote him a song like a farewell letter, not anger, but a goodbye full of gratitude and love. I will always love you. Think about it. Jolene and I will always love you in the same 24 hours from the same pen. It was one of the most productive days in human history. I Will Always Love You went to #1 on the country charts. Years later, Whitney Houston sang that song, and it became the best-selling single by a woman of all time. But the one who wrote the words and the melody was that mountain girl. Even Elvis Presley wanted to sing that song, but his manager demanded half the publishing rights. Dolly refused. That song was hers. That no would earn her millions in the years to come. The mountain girl was also a brilliant businesswoman. What kind of courage does it take to say no to Elvis? In 1974, Dolly left Porter Wagoner and his show. From now on, she would walk alone, under her own name, as her own star. The country world thought it was a mistake. They were wrong, because that barefoot mountain girl was no longer in anyone's shadow. She made her own decisions, wrote her own songs, built her own empire. The little girl in the coat of many colors was about to climb all the way to the top. But the most beautiful part was this. No matter how high she rose, she never forgot those mountains, that cabin, that coat of many colors. Fame did not change her. She changed fame. The girl born into poverty who walked barefoot, whom the other children mocked, was going to become one of the most beloved people in the world. And this was only the beginning. Dolly Parton's story began with a sack of oatmeal, but the real treasure she carried down from those mountains could never be measured in money. Heart, talent, and a dream she would never give up. Some dreams are far bigger than the place they are born. Dolly Parton came down from the mountains and conquered the world. In part 2 of the series, we'll tell you how this mountain girl took over Hollywood. Support us so the story can continue, and subscribe, because we do this every day.